This is another movie I only went to because my younger brother called me, wanting to hang out. He really likes Deadpool. He had a number of Deadpool comics some years ago, which he actually gave me to hold on to until he's away from his current, not very kind to teenage boys, home family environment. I haven't really looked through them. I skimmed them some years ago. Now, I've never been a huge comic book follower. I never got into them as a kid. I don't really know why. I think I was never well, when I was really young, I wasn't much of a fiction reader. Actually, at all. I was one of those kids who would just hang out in the nonfiction section during school trips to the library, which, grabbing the science books off the shelf. I always learned more from those than I ever did in class. So I really didn't get into comics until I gained an interest in manga and anime. And even then, I only read and bought the ones I was personally interested in. Well, I did finish collecting and reading Fushigi Genbu Kaiden just last year. I began Shokugeki no Soma recently. Well, I should see if I can find the second volume. I'm still very behind on all the books I want to read and collect. Anyway, I went with my younger brother to go see this on Monday. The matinee tickets were very cheap, and as is the norm these days, we were two of only, I think, 5 or 6 people in the entire theater. Sometimes we're the only ones at all. How movie theaters are surviving still is a real mystery to me, especially with their usual prices. And even more so now when we have almost nothing but exasperatingly obnoxious identity politics and social justice shit in movies that really needs to end. What I know of the character of Deadpool only comes from my brother and occasional people I've listened to talk about comics. I haven't read any of them enough to really get a sense just from skimming through the pages. So I'm not a scholar on the character by any means. I meant to rent the first movie before we went to go see this, but I didn't have the time over the weekend. This movie is... well, it's more entertaining than I thought it would be. Of course, I don't really know what my expectations were. I guess I was kind of expecting it to just be this, typical rumored as Deadpool is advertised as this dirty mouth superhero. Yeah, there's a little more to it. I've seen this type of story before. I did not watch the first movie. I didn't have time. So this begins with the main character going back to his family life, or in this case, love life, and they were about to start a family. Then his loved one gets killed, and Deadpool is recruited by an old friend, Colossus. I had to look his name up. Apparently they have some friendship in the past, to help out the XMen and become a better person, to find himself and redeem himself, find a purpose in life. I did not know Deadpool crossed over with the X-Men. That the universe, I don't know if it's the same or if they overlap, or I don't know, they're trying to interconnect all the superhero universes. But anyway, so Colossus enlists his help in pacifying a boy named Russell, who has the nickname of Fire Fist, who was apparently abused or experimented on by people who were trying to suppress mutants, which is something that has been present in X-Men stories since the beginning of the X-Men, since the beginning of the the comics, the TV series, and it's not a new thing. In fact, I would still enjoy the XMen, the first one that came out with Hugh Jackman as Wolverine that came out in the early 2000s. I'd still prefer that movie over this. But this Fire Fist is in the middle of a standoff with people trying to, I think, recapture him. Deadpool sucks at this kind of job. He sucks. He tries to talk with the kid, but is very quickly escalates into Deadpool-level violence. Both he and Russell are sent to this prison after they're restrained with these power-suppressing collars, which kind of similar to the Radahans in Legend of the Seeker, that are similar collars that are used to suppress wizards' powers, if you're familiar with that series. I think that TV series is actually better than the books they're based on, but it's neither here nor there for now. So they're sent to this prison called the Icebox, which Icebox is also an old term for either freezer or refrigerator or both, which is fitting, I guess. It's a prison built into a frozen mountain. Now, in a few brief conversations between Russell and Wade, which is Deadpool's civilian name, we learned that Russell wanted to be a superhero, but was either discouraged or prevented or something like that. This movie really doesn't. It gives us the bare bones of details, but not much else. I don't know if more was told in the first movie. Doesn't look like it, but I might be wrong. So he was discouraged either by himself or by other people from becoming a superhero because there aren't any overweight superheroes. Of course, he eventually befriends this gigantic juggernaut guy who is the very definition of big-boned. I don't really like the idea that this is why we're supposed to feel bad for Russell, if that was the point. Because, one, well, I already went through, we're not really given any more to his story, other than he was tampered with these mutant experimenters, which is hardly a new thing in the X-Men and overlapping stories. And two, well, guess what, people? At some point, we're going to have to face the reality that overweight people are not attractive. It's the truth. And there are very real biological reasons as to why. For one thing, it's showing that they're not healthy. For two, it's showing that they're not really trying to work on themselves. Now, it also could be, and the frequency of this is increasing, that they were drugged as kids, which very well might be the case in Russell's case, but again, we're not given a whole lot of detail, and we really need to stop drugging our kids. Stop, labeling them with these ridiculous, made-up disorders at first sign of nonconformity. It's a huge problem. It also reminded me of the movie The Hunt for the Wilder People. My mother asked me to go see that movie with her sometime last year. I wasn't particularly interested. I thought it was going to be a slightly more interesting tracking people through the wilderness movie, which happened, but the characters were... I did not feel sympathy for them. And these characters are only slightly better. I was actually going to make a review video about that movie shortly after I saw it, but I just did not want to revisit it. I despised it that much. Why should I feel any specific sympathy? Not that I shouldn't feel sympathy. I mean, I know there are huge problems, but any specific or extra sympathy for overweight, delinquent kids just because they're some kind of misunderstood? In the Hunt for the Wilder People movie, I know the guy, I know the kid liked haikus. That barely added anything. Still wasn't really a good kid. Wasn't the worst, but we're all misunderstood, and one of the primary culprits of that is our disappearing ability to talk openly. Except that talking openly and honestly means risking being offensive at times, but not sweating the small stuff and learning to compromise. So why is this character unique? And this goes for Deadpool as well. Now, to be a little bit fair, Deadpool was not quite as vulgar in this movie as I thought he might be. I know one of the taglines for the first movie was, "The Merc with a Mouth." A protagonist who talks dirty and isn't a goody-two-shoes hero is nothing new. Not these days. I, again, haven't read the Deadpool comics. I've skimmed one or two of my brother's, but that's about it. Some comic book fans I've heard talk about Deadpool, talk about the stories, and maybe the comic stories are more interesting. They sound a little bit better, or more engaging than this. It would not be the first time that a movie didn't do its source material justice. But as for the characters that swear and kill every moment they're on screen, it works on occasion, or when there's a very justified reason for it, like in the movies, the Taken series, or Death Wish earlier this year, or again going back to the early 2000s XMen movies, the Wolverine movies. What ties so many people to Wolverine, I think, is, and I hated the Logan movie. I hated that one they came out with recently. What makes Wolverine so much more relatable is that he's a guy, again, one who had been experimented on, by scientists, by mutant suppressors in this universe long ago, and he was struggling with that, but he really was basically a good guy. He tried hard to keep to this sense of honor, even though it wasn't always talked about. You could tell through his actions, and there is some connection with Wolverine and the Japanese Code of Ultra. I know he has some vague ties to samurai. It's been a while since I've seen the Wolverine origins movie story. Even that I would like to go into a bit more. Not the case with Deadpool. And Deadpool's not as bad as I thought he'd be, but this, superhero with a mouth thing, it's not that new, and it's not enough to build a strong movie off of. He, after breaking out of the icebox, which I think he was originally just gonna let his cancer kill him in the icebox. Now, he was just gonna wait it out. And, through some... I remember it better than I'm saying. I don't care that much for this movie. It's entertaining enough that I didn't hate seeing it, but it's irritating. Russell is captured, and Deadpool goes to... So he's going to go find him. He's going to go, redeem himself. Again, we've seen this before. And he gathers this team in some superhero recruit audition scene that actually really reminded me of a similar scene in Mystery Men, which I'd see that movie before this again. Not that this was terrible, but and he builds this team called the XForce, and as they try to go, they parachute, they skydive to catch up to the truck that Russell is on, and every single one of them gets stupidly killed except for the woman. Again, male disposability, and it has to be, of course, a minority woman. This is getting so irritating. It just... The only reason this didn't hurt that bad to watch... Well, there's two reasons. The first is it's entertaining enough that I wasn't in agony watching it as I was in... what was that Transformers movie that felt like it was only 2.5 hours, but it felt like 5 hours long, literally? It was The Last Night or something. Which is weird. They could have done so much with the night mythology. We really do need honorable heroes again. We really do. But this movie was entertaining enough that I wasn't in agony watching it. I did laugh a few times. My brother laughed more than I do, but he's kind of more at the age where they find this funnier longer than I do. Not infinitely longer, but a little bit longer. And the second reason is they did kind of wrap up the movie nicely. The last little bit was a decent wrap up to this movie. Honestly, all this movie has going for it is that, well, at least from my perspective, and I may not be a Deadpool fan, but again, I've seen a lot of movies like this. It's not boring, I guess, but this is not a new type of story, and I'm really ready for the return of the actually honorable heroes. How about you?